Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth, and fancy seeing you here. And you are very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of the dceu Daily. If you are feeling charitable today, please smash the subscribe button and the like button, and please do follow me on Twitter at MoviesTVMad. On today's dceu Daily, I'm going to be doing something I don't do very often. Reading a Collider article and spinning it on its head. Today is called the unpopular opinion. I'm also going to be giving you my reaction to what Zack Snyder said about Clark's Fortress of Solitude and his point of view on Jimmy Olsen. So today is the unpopular opinion, but I want you to all remember that I'm a supporter of Zack Snyder, Man of Steel and BVS. They are great movies, but we can't just be sheep. We can't all be part of an echo chamber. We must be free to give our views out. So here we go. Let's begin with this article. Why we needed Man of Steel 2 before Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Man of Steel opened in June 2013 and performed well, but not at the level that Warner Brothers hoped, and in my opinion, not in a level a Superman film should perform. In a world where the Avengers was able to conquer box office and set a new record, again, at the end of the day, that was a team-up movie. So you can't compare a team-up movie with a standalone movie, but you can say that Superman should have made as much money as Avengers, because Superman is the most famous character, superhero name in the world. Man of Steel ultimately ended up with a worldwide take of 668 million, which is good, but that's not what Warner Brothers wanted for a new Superman movie. That cost 225 million. Superman is a household name, exactly what I've said, and his new movie was coming from Zack Snyder. Christopher Nolan, clearly Superman on his own wasn't going to cut it, especially with Marvel already bringing all their superheroes together. In a post-Avengers landscape, another movie just starring Superman wasn't good enough. You had to start grouping superheroes together. Not necessarily, which is how we get to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice instead of Man of Steel 2. Rather than delve into various issues I have with Batman v Superman, and for reference, I'm talking about the R-rated Ultimate Edition here whenever I mention Batman v Superman, I wanted to talk about how he approaches Superman, not in how he compares to previous iterations or what he is or isn't supposed to be. I want to look at him on Zack Snyder's terms, and how he's presented in this movie and in Man of Steel. Man of Steel is pretty typical origin story stuff. Clark Kent running from his destiny, trying to stay anonymous because his parents taught him that anonymity would protect him, and ultimately deciding that he has to come out of the shadows and accept his place as a potential saviour of humanity by defeating Zod. Again, whatever issues you may have with that presentation of Superman, that's the character as designed by Zack Snyder and his writers. Well, they weren't really his writers. I mean, you're talking about Christopher Nolan and David Goyer. They belong to no one. They wrote that film independently of Zack. When you come into Batman v Superman, Superman isn't really there. Just as a recap, here's what happens in the introduction of the film. We get a nightmarish sequence of Batman remembering the deaths of his parents. That Bruce's name is Martha. Bruce's mother's name is Martha, and that the bats that terrified him as a child inspired him to become Batman. Cut to the present day, and we're following Bruce Wayne as he charges into Metropolis to try and save people while Superman and Zod fight above. They're fighting, and Zod's plans are causing massive devastation, and Bruce Wayne is trying to save people. He looks up, and you can see he's already blaming these aliens for the destruction they can cause. Then we jump ahead 18 months, and people are finding kryptonite in the Indian Ocean. Matt Goldberg, thanks for the recap. I thought this was going to be a thought piece. Those missing 18 months are kind of key because they were an opportunity to tell us who Superman is now. This is actually a good point, that the world knows he's out there. Instead, Batman v Superman is largely a reactive picture. Man of Steel introduces Superman to the world. Lois saying to Clark, "Welcome to the planet," is how the film ends. And then Batman v Superman is how various entities perceive him. Batman, Lex Luthor and the media were learning about Superman from people who don't know him. And to be fair to the film, that ties into the larger idea that Batman and Superman are enemies because they don't know each other. The widely mocked Martha moment is about their commonality, and they both have mothers named Martha. Superman isn't some absent alien figure who does what he pleases, and Superman isn't some cruel vigilante who doesn't care about people. Their preconceived notions were wrong. The problem here is that nothing really new is added or shaded in the character of Superman. Superman wrestles a bit with how he's supposed to interact with humanity, but largely his character is defined by his interactions with Lois Lane. For Batman v Superman, Lois and humanity are one the same. He loves her. She represents the best of humanity, therefore Superman loves humanity. But that's a pretty thin symbolism when you're also trying to cast Superman into a realistic framework. Based on what we see from the media reactions as well as the Africa set piece, the film is genuinely puzzled about how Superman is supposed to operate in the real world. It takes him far outside of Metropolis because he's not just rescuing cats in trees, he's also taking out warlords. So what does that mean? Can Superman act unilaterally? If Clark Kent is investigating Batman for human rights violations, does Superman care about human rights? Yeah. These are questions that could have been answered if the studio hadn't rushed to Batman v Superman and given Superman one more movie to himself. Man of Steel, regardless of what you think about it, has a new take on the character that's completely distinct from the Christopher Reeve era or the 2006 reboot, Superman Returns. Actually, Superman Returns isn't a reboot, it's a continuation of the Reeve and Donner verse, right? Zack Snyder didn't really get a chance to build on that character because Batman v Superman has to service a bunch of new characters. Batman, Lex, Alfred, Wonder Woman, and set up Justice League. And ultimately, the writers decided it was best to view Superman through a reactionary framework, since that's how characters like Batman, Lex, view the Kryptonian. What was Superman doing in the 18 months between Man of Steel and Batman v Superman? There's a media montage where it shows him rescuing people, but that's not really enough. He usually photographed as distant and aloof and unknowable and a god figure who doesn't really interact with people beyond helping them from disasters. But what does Superman think and feel about all this? Is he comfortable in this role? Does he question himself? Why didn't he make an effort to clean up all the Kryptonian debris around the globe? What does Superman want beyond having sex with Lois Lane in the tub? Ooh, interesting. I'm not going to say that's a bad point. He does pose an interesting question here, and I'm going to answer all of this as a Man of Steel and BVS fan. Batman v Superman is 3 hours long, and it doesn't really answer these questions. Late in the film, when Superman realizes he has to sacrifice himself in order to defeat Doomsday, he tells Lois, "This is my world. You are my world." But the film only shows that the latter is true for most of what we've seen of Superman. He's been separate from the world, which makes sense. Given his upbringing, his parents were protective of him, and his dad chose to get sucked up into a tornado rather than have his son reveal himself to the world. His mum tells him in Batman v Superman, "You don't owe this world anything. You never did." If these are the actions that mould Superman's belief system, then that is his connection to our world, question mark. Then what is his connection to our world, question mark. It's now far too late for Man of Steel 2 that would explain all of this and show Superman coming into his own on the world stage. I doubt we'll even get a Man of Steel 2 with Henry Cavill and his take on the character, as Warner Brothers has already opted to reboot Batman with Robert Pattinson. The studio may decide it's better to start from scratch rather than give Cavill another shot at his own solo Superman movie. And that's a shame because Cavill's not a bad Superman and his take on the character had validity. But instead of getting to explore the new adaptation of Superman, the Man of Steel had to be put through the prism of a large superhero blockbuster that ultimately lost sight of him. I tell you what, I'm normally highly triggered by Collider, but they do make a good point. Especially, Matt Goldberg makes a great point about the 18 months we don't know what's happened there. And to be honest with you, what has truly happened there, it's true, obviously, that people now know him as Superman. That was even referenced in Man of Steel. But what was he doing in those 18 months? And also, it's true, what does he feel about, human rights being broken? We see how upset he is by Batman's actions. And that's important. And as I say, BVS is still a great film. These talking points don't change how much I love BVS. But it's a great point, right? Superman could, if we saw those 18 months, could have been fleshed out more. Now, he's talking about another Man of Steel movie. Now, to do another Man of Steel movie, right, as well as, do like Cyborg movies, which was the original plan, and a Wonder Woman movie, and an Aquaman standalone movie, and all of that, then you've got to fit another Superman film. So I think Matt's got a point here. But I also would like to flip this upside down and say that Batman should have got a standalone film before Batman v Superman. I would have loved to have seen a film where we see the Joker kill whichever Robin it actually is, Jason Todd or Dick Grayson. Zack says it's Dick Grayson. Interesting decision, but anyway, right? If we see a film, a Batman standalone film, that has an older Batman still, but introduces us to Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Jared Leto's Joker, having us see Jared Leto's Joker and Harley Quinn be the villains of that Batman standalone film and show us Joker beat Robin to death and show us why Batman has become what he has become in BVS would have been a brilliant idea. So you have a Batfleck standalone movie after Man of Steel, then Cyborg, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Aquaman. And after all that, right, you do Man of Steel 2, right? And you do what Matt is suggesting here. What happened in those 18 months prior to BVS, right? Then, after introducing those characters, then you can do a Batman v Superman, introduce these characters, and do something very, very exciting. I think that would have worked. So I actually think that Matt's got a point here. But as well as a Man of Steel 2 before BVS, as I said, I'm going to reiterate this, there should have been a Batfleck standalone movie. And I think not doing that was a real mistake. Fleshing characters out is very, very important. Now, Warner Brothers wanted a Batman v Superman movie. This was definitely not Zack Snyder's decision. He took it because it was exciting, but ultimately you've got too many missing pieces, right? Now, I personally don't think any of this that Matt says hurts BVS, but I do think if you do a standalone Batfleck film after MOS, and then you do standalone films for the rest of the Justice League characters, right, individually, right, then you do a Man of Steel 2, right, and then you do a BVS, then you do a Justice League, all of a sudden, we know these characters even more. So when we go into Justice League, it feels more earned, yeah? More earned, more gained, you know the characters, and it's a lot more exciting. It's what happened with the MCU. By the time you get to the Avengers, you actually know these characters. But oh no, Kevin Sugihara and Warner Brothers wanted to rush this and, catch up with Disney. And in the end, they shot themselves in the foot. And that's my opinion on that. And please comment down below and let me know what you think of the Collider article by Matt Goldberg, and also my opinion of what could have and should have happened pre-BVS. Right, now we go back to the Zack Snyder frame-by-frame commentary of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Two things I want to talk about today. And one of them is that he mentioned that we already know there is no Fortress of Solitude in Man of Steel or BVS or in the DCEU. In fact, what we get is the spaceship, right? Which is as close to a Fortress of Solitude that we get, right? Now, I want to talk about what Zack actually said, that in BVS and in the whole of the DCEU, he had this idea of Superman having a Fortress of Solitude in his head. So when he goes up to the mountains, the snowy mountains, and he talks to Kevin Costner's Jonathan Kent, that is actually his fortress of solitude in his head. Now, I think this is a beautiful, interesting concept, but when you watch BVS, you don't know that. You don't know that. You only know that now because Zack Snyder's told you that. That is simply not good enough. I want to know, and I agree, it's a very difficult thing to do, to explain visually how Superman has a fortress of solitude in his head. But if you were able to achieve that, that's a beautiful thing. Now, going back to the fortress of solitude, I'm a very old-fashioned person in terms of Superman. I think there's certain trappings you can't do away with. And the two trappings are very important to me, and I think are very important to Superman's character and Clark Kent's character, is the Fortress of Solitude and Jimmy Olsen. So the Fortress of Solitude, I think, needs to be there. Needs to be there in physical form. So if you want to connect that to his brain somehow, that's fine. But I want to see a Fortress of Solitude standing there looking glorious with all the history of Krypton. The Force Ghost of Jor-El and Lara and other Kryptonians teaching him stuff. The fortress is important and it needs to be there in physical form. And Zack not going with that, personally, is a mistake. Now we go to Jimmy Olsen. He confirmed that the CIA guy, disguised as a photographer, is actually Jimmy Olsen. Now, I could have lived with Michael Cassidy as Jimmy Olsen, because Michael Cassidy is one of the most underrated actors in Hollywood, and I'm really excited that Zack's going to give him an extended run in his what is it called? His zombie thing, something of the dead. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, Michael's going to be in there. I love Michael in the OC and in especially Smallville because I think he's a very charming actor and character. So I would have loved him as maybe a little bit of an older Jimmy Olsen, because Jimmy Olsen in the comics is a young man. He's a teenager. But what I don't like is they killed him. They killed him. Jimmy Olsen is a very important character for Lois, but in a more part for Superman and Clark. The reason Jimmy Olsen's important in the comics is because he is our way into the story, into this grandiose story and this grandiose superhero. Now, I want you to think about this. Think about the Doctor Who companion. What's always been said about the Doctor Who companion is they're our way in to the TARDIS and the Doctor's universe, right? And so, think about it. You have a Superman movie with Jimmy Olsen being Superman's best pal. This ordinary guy, this ordinary kid who's just left school and has got his first job, and he ends up being this superheroic alien's best pal. That's amazing, and that's important, and that matters. And I think taking those two elements of the Fortress of Solitude and Jimmy Olsen, and just making Jimmy Olsen a cameo, takes away the importance of what Jimmy Olsen is. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and please follow me on Twitter at MoviesTVMad, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.